Well, folks, it's time to kick it old school. So you can feel cool. Give it to me, baby. Baby. Yeah.
Welcome to the MC Variety Hour, a podcast of the No Phony Network.
Woohoo! Welcome, welcome!
Thank you for tuning in to episode 31, part 2 of the Women's Health Series.
Yes, we are going to talk a little bit about the history of women in the medical field. We are going to start this segment by adding in a promotion by Autobiography Book Club, a podcast from Harpy Media.
Hey, this is Leah, and I am one half of the hosting team from Autobiography Book Club, and you are listening to a podcast on the No Phony Podcast Network.
Let's start with the very first female MD. That's right, MD stands for medical doctor, I think. Doesn't it? I don't know.
It sure does.
I think so, medical doctor. Okay, yeah, woo, look at me with my knowledge. Now, that is not to say that there was not female physicians and healers prior to this, but this is the first recognized woman in the healthcare industry. In 1849, Elizabeth Blackwell graduated from New York's Geneva Medical College as first in her class. By 1853, Blackwell had opened a clinic called New York Infirmary for Women and Children, and by 1868, she opened the Women's Medical College at the infirmary. This was quite a feat in a time of extreme prejudice against women who were achieving. However, we know that it was a very long time before women really became the forefront phase of medical care. By the end of the 19th century, there were 19 women medical colleges and 9 women's hospitals. Isn't it sad that, that they had to be women's? There was women's colleges and women's, like they had to learn differently.
Absolutely.
However, women who wanted to be a part of coeducation still had a struggle. Did that sound like I said coagulation?
It kind of did.
Coeducation still had to struggle. You want to know why? Some jackass named Howard H. Clark proclaimed, that's right, proclaimed that women seeking advanced education would develop monstrous brains and puny bodies, and for some fucking reason it would give us abnormally weak digestion. Oh no, not bad poops. You fucking asshole. However, a lot of people bought into the idea that something bad could happen to women if we were so educated. However, that did not stop the U.S. because with these colleges and hospitals we also constituted 5% of American physicians. So, I wonder how many physicians, I guess we should have looked that up, dang it.
Probably, but whatever.
Like a number, 5% of American physicians, is that out of was that like 5 out of 1,000 across the country? Who knows?
Probably, something along those lines.
But 5%, that's not too bad for a little bit of a start there, but should have happened a long time ago. I don't want to get on a rant. I like to go on rants, but I'm not going to.
You should. It'd be okay. Now, don't forget, by the earliest 20th century, we saw a decline in this medical success. In fact, they started to close the women's colleges. They refused to reform the medical education system and, of course, the rise in other health fields, such as public health, nursing, and social work. We also know that in the 1950s, we really pushed the domesticated women aspect. We love saying we should be the homemakers. After all that hard work Elizabeth Blackwell did, we barely made a mark in the field for damn near 75 years. But, alas.
That's fucking ridiculous.
It really is. It fucking was ridiculous. Damn it. In the 1960s, the 1960s happened, guys. Woo! And you know what that means? Title IX of the Higher Education Act. That's right, dickwads. You had to quit discriminating us based on our gender. Then the shit got real. By 1974, bam! 22.4% of all new med school entrants were women. And today it has increased to 45%. So, suck it!
Suck it! I love when you say that. You have the best suck it around. I'm just going to say
yeah,
it.
I do.
All right, now, Miles, don't get too happy, okay? I'm going to bring it down a little bit. I'm really sorry.
I'm so good
but I
at
promise to
bringing it
lift
down.
you back up. I know. I'm going to lift you back up in spirit, girl. By the later part of the 20th century, over-discrimination was a little less apparent. However, y'all know that we continued to thicken that glass ceiling with sexual harassment and, of course, lack of maternity support because we were still the main caregivers of children. We continue to persistently try to not allow women the same kind of status that male doctors get. Although we are still making up numbers in how we enter the medical field and, of course, how we are staying in the medical profession, we were finally given some rights back to ourselves, but we had to constantly go back to a bad place in order to come out into a new, better place. I mean, it wasn't even until 1931 that PMS was, air quotes everybody, quote unquote, discovered. We really lacked basic medical care and decisions about our bodies for centuries. And hell, well, y'all know that the fight over our body never ends, and it's a continuing fight to this day. We would rather watch a woman die a slow, painful fucking death than take care of her maternal care. As much as we are happy that we are in the medical field, that woman can be our doctors and our nurses and our cardiologists. We also know that female doctors get paid $20,000 less a year than male doctors. Actually, according to a report that just came out in March of this year, women doctors earn 27.7% less than their male counterparts, and that is just an average. You know, that's like city to city. I'm sure in more liberal, I guess we want to say, places, maybe it's a little bit more even, but I bet where, you know, women are still viewed in different areas as being the lesser sex. You know, that's just like at salary.com where you can find out where you make the most money at. In places like Charleston, South Carolina, for example, women doctors make 37% less, or $135,000 about less than male doctors. In Kansas City, Missouri, is $132,000. In fact, it doesn't matter which field they go into. And then we have a really great chart that we're going to post with when we do our show notes and stuff to show you the wage gap and how it varies among medical specialties.
And it's really
there's just pure
ridiculous.
There's pure discrimination across the board, and we turn a blind eye to it. And to me, and I know I've said this before, but I always feel like women's issues and women's rights and women's equality, it always gets pushed to the back like it's an afterthought or it's not important. I almost feel like we're invisible. You know, like, well, you're a woman, you know, deal with it. I don't know. I feel like our needs and things are always pushed aside for the next new cause. And I'm not saying that the equality for everybody and isn't what this country needs. It just seems like women are still to this day an afterthought and pushed aside for other things. You know, like gay rights have made a far quicker progress in a short amount of time than women's rights have over the last 100 years.
Absolutely.
And even, you know, and even civil rights. And for the double whammy of being a colored woman is just, it boggles my mind how those women, you know, we have black women and Hispanic women in top levels of the government now, and it boggles my mind how they made it that far, like how hard they had to have worked to have gotten there. And I know we're talking about the medical field right now, but that was just kind of, I was thinking of a Supreme Court justice and just some of the women like Condoleezza Rice, you know, that they've made it that far, that we have those judges and scientists and mathematicians now. You know.
Well, that's a huge part
So
that
many-
we're going to get into in part 3 is kind of like women of color or of any color
Yes.
that is, and women ethnicities, and how, you know, already being a woman is hard. But then you get into being a woman who isn't white. You know, then you're
a double negative.
Oh, yeah, you know, I mean, it's such a hard prejudice and the things that happen to females. So you're completely right where you're going with that.
That's, to me, I know I've talked about it before, but I had a very diverse childhood. I grew up with a lot of Mexicans and black people, and saw them struggle. And I love diversity, and I love what we can all bring something to the table. And it kills me that skin color is such a factor in deciding who gets to be successful and who gets opportunities and who doesn't, all because of the melatonin in our fucking skin. I mean, that's just so, to me, prehistoric and dumb and cavemanish, you know, like, really? Just because somebody's a little darker than me, or I don't have a dick, so I couldn't possibly be as good as this guy at math. You know, it just kills me. And I know I get off on a rant and but it's such a passion to me. Women's rights have always been something that, and it's because of this discrimination that I started to catch on to in my early 20s. Like, this isn't fair, you know? And I was groomed, or we grow up with it, and it's so prevalent in our nature that when I was growing up, I thought that that's what I was supposed to do, was get married, have babies. That's what mom did. That's what my grandma did. You know, it wasn't until I got older and I was like, that's not right. I should be able to do whatever I want. And I think our generation especially kind of woke to that. You know, a lot of our friends, like your kids are a lot younger than mine, but, you know, people are waiting, you know, not that much younger, but women are waiting longer and longer to have children so that they can have careers. And I think that's awesome. You know, that a lot of my friends that I went to school with have kids that are under 10. You know, I have friends who are just still having babies, a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, you know? I think that's awesome.
Yeah. No, I think that it's great that women are finally starting to take their own deep breath and their own ownership of their bodies and how they want to feel about themselves. And, you know, all these guys, and they want to, you know, everybody wants to talk about, oh, you women are you guys are suddenly so empowered. But first of all, we've always been empowered. You know, the 90s. Nobody
would give us a voice.
Love Courtney Love, but she really brought that, like, fuck you attitude, you know, and I appreciate her for that. I mean, I appreciate, you know, obviously, like, Garbage and Cranberries and, you know, Alanis Morissette even. I mean, everybody had their own, like, foothold into their own womanness of a lot of, you know, us millennial, exennial, generational women. But, you know, we still fight the fights, you know. I mean, it's amazing to me that, you know, as of this year, it was $131,000 difference between a male and a female doctor that went in with the exact same qualifications. You know, and
that's disgusting.
And I look, I'm not here and saying, hey, just because, you know, you're a woman or you're a woman of color, you should always get, you know, first in line. But you shouldn't have to fight harder. You should be able to stand in the same line. You know, and just because you're a woman or a male, you should be able to get paid the same. You know, all those things, when we're talking about equality, you know, we're talking about it across the board. I don't think that, it's not like I expect that if I suddenly went to college, that I should be able to just walk into any boardroom and say, okay, I'm a female, so you guys need to hire me at like $20,000 extra than everybody else because, you know, that's it. That's not what equality is about. It's about taking people and quit looking at them based on their sex, based on their color, and actually take them for who they are. And absolutely, there are companies who do struggle with hiring females or hiring people of color or hiring those who are part of the LGBTQIA like community. And I understand that they, you know, they're trying to embrace that. So maybe they are taking a few people of color, or they're taking people out of different communities and they're hiring them. And they may not have the same qualifications, or they may lack some of those qualifications. But again, they're helping create a sense of equality. And so it's not just about hitting those numbers. And I'm not saying that there's not companies that are just doing what they're doing just to hit the numbers, okay? Just so they can get their tax breaks and their, you know, whatnot, but they're still pieces of shit, you know? So I'm not saying that it's all done in good faith. But of course, there should be, you know, hey, you haven't been given any right over the last 70 years. Maybe we can help you stop fighting so hard. You know, it's okay to prove yourself. It's okay to make those qualifications, but you shouldn't have to work 10 times harder just because of your color, just because of your sexual orientation, just because whether or not you're a male or a female. Those things shouldn't matter in the long run. At the end of the day, there's a lot of companies that have a lot of making up to do, and the medical profession is one of them. You know, and it's like, even when it comes like med school training, you know, we have to get taught, and we should be getting taught things like salary negotiation. That as females, we're already working really, really hard against a bunch of guys. But do we know once we get into that interview, not just to get hired, but to get hired at the value that we are actually worth? You know, and are we being pushed to demand better pay? Because right now we're being pushed to just take the job because you're lucky that you even got this job. You know, and we're not.
Yeah, I was just going to add that when you said that was that you got the job. And I was going to say, and just be thankful that we gave you table scraps at all, bitch.
Exactly. And I mean, I, between the burnout and the standards, it's no doubt that women want to leave the medical field because of these fucking assholes, you know? Everything about our life is so difficult. And personally, I do hope this changes, because I do want to I not only want to see females, I want to see qualified, happy female doctors, ones who want to take care of me, because they are getting, one, paid to do it, you know, and they're getting treated equally to take care of me. And I don't want to have to get, quote unquote, different health care just because it's a male or a female doctor. They should get paid the same. They both can save my life. They both went to college. They both have degrees. They both are hired at the same hospital. Why does one make $130,000 more? And how is that going to mentally affect a female doctor in the field? And then they want to blame, well, look at her, she's a female, that's why she can't take it. No, y'all keep fucking pushing the world down on her. Give us a fucking break. And so if you see a female doctor, any female nurse, any woman in the medical field, I don't care if she's sending you the bill that you absolutely hate and despise paying for, thank her for being there. Because that job is something that she is working so much harder at than her male counterparts, just based on the fact that she is a just because she's a female, you know?
Exactly. And we didn't talk really, I mean, we're talking about the medical field, and I don't want to get off into a different field, but something I was thinking about was when we were talking about women can't do what men can do, is just, what was it, 2012, I want to say. It's been just in the last 10 years that women are allowed to be combat in the military. Stupid. You know, we finally, I mean, that just happened recently, like, where it was like, oh, okay, I guess we'll let women have guns. You know, like, woo, thank you. Can I get it in pink? You know?
Right?
But we're talking about the medical profession and equal pay, but that just kind of made me think about that, like, things that were just now starting to be granted, you know, and that was something like women can be combat veterans, because I saw a lot of nasty remarks back then about women, and when that was a thing, and arguments online for and against it, you know, and it's like, well, and that's something that we hear a lot from men who are, I mean, don't get me wrong, men can be feminists too, and there are men out there who support us and absolutely see the problem and are completely okay with treating a coworker as an equal and wanting her to be paid the same level as them. We're talking about people who make policy, and they make these rules, and they're the ones who decide the salaries, and the fact that it's just been in the last, I want to say 10 years. I know it was just recently, like with the Iraq war. Like, well, if women want equality, then they should be out there on the front lines with men. And you know what happened? Okay, we'd be more than happy to. We've been trying to for years, and y'all motherfuckers wouldn't let us because we were women. You know, like, sit at a desk, work in the medical tent, be a radio operator. You know, my mom was in the military. I've gone on about that, and that's what she was. She was a radio operator from 89 to 92 or 93. She did her 4 years and then discharged out of the military. But that's what she did. And even she was in the military during Desert Storm, and she wasn't stationed over there in Saudi Arabia. Yes, that was Saudi Arabia. Or the Gulf War. She was in the military during that too. She was stationed over in Germany as a radio operator, taking, you know, like doing surveillance or whatever, like listening to radio transmissions, things like that. She was in Germany during a war in Saudi Arabia, you know, as a woman. You know, but anyways, that's pretty much, you know, there's just pure discrimination across the board in every profession. You know, we're just now starting to see women engineers. Did we have a something about, I thought maybe you shared something, or we were talking about, maybe I watched a show. Oh, I wish that I could remember, because it was talking about this woman. She was the first ever, I know we talked about doctor, but she was like the first black woman. I can't remember it now, and it's just right on the tip of my head because I was just watching it last night. To ever be accepted into her university for, I believe it was the first woman engineer that was allowed into a college, and just her accomplishments. But you know what I really think is cool is, have you seen the movie Hidden Figures?
No, I have not watched that. It's on my list
It's
right
pretty
now on
good.
Netflix.
It's pretty good.
My husband watched it. And he liked it a lot.
We're seeing more entertainment, more movies, more documentaries, things like that are focused. Like, you know, I love watching Drunk History, which I know isn't a podcast. Sorry, everybody. But I've noticed that he tries to mix in female comics that talk, and whenever, usually, when it's a female comic, they usually tackle female stories. You know, he picks a woman, and he seems to me, it seems like he really wants to make sure to get those stories out about how women in the 1800s, you know, it's history. So, how he highlights women I've never even heard of, you know, and how they changed the world. And they're just basically unrecognized in history, and they're just a footnote, if that. You know, I don't know where Drunk History gets some of their stories, because half of them, I'm a history buff, and half of them, I'm like, I didn't fucking know that. But I love that show because it cracks me up. People getting drunk telling history stories. But it's also useful and true information, so that cracks me up. I like it.
No, it's good. It's good. No, I think that there's a lot of things. It's like Seth Meyers has his own bit. I'm not a big, huge Seth Meyers fan, but I do know that on his show, he specifically has things that says, you know, things that Seth Meyers can't say. And there's this whole part because he's got two female writers, and they said, you know, Seth can't say these things because of being, you know, like he can make these jokes, but they're not appropriate for who he is to make those jokes. And so they said, okay, well, why don't we let the writers go on air and make those jokes? You know, and so they can. You know, he has a black female writer and a lesbian female writer. And they do this segment where, you know, the black comic writer can make her jokes and the lesbian can make her jokes, you know, and Seth Meyers just sits there and cracks up, and then he has his little jokes in between. You know, because they realize that, you know, to some part, it's not about even political correctness, but you really can't have a white male saying some of the things that these females are saying. For one, it's just not that funny when it comes out of his mouth. And two, he doesn't get the narrative of it. He doesn't understand the punctuation, what needs to be said, how it needs to be said. So it's those little things that, you're right, even in the entertainment industry. You know, we're just now starting. I mean, Ocean's 8 came out, and it's with an all-female cast, and Ghostbusters came out with an all-female cast, and all these things. And again, it's, you know, for one, they're hitting massive blockbusters. And, you know, if Hollywood doesn't understand that, I mean, the success of Black Panther, you know, and even the success now of Ocean's 8, you know, there is things that can be done, you know, if you actually allow them to be good. It's not about just making an all-female movie. It's about making a damn good all-female movie. It's not about making just a black comic book, you know, action movie. It's about making it good, making it worth it, making it of value and of substance. And it's the same thing when it comes to females and, you know, any job. Just because I'm a female and just because I work in an office, and I do travel a lot with my job, but it's amazing how many people assume I don't do the same kind of work as my male counterparts, even though I took over for their exact same job, you know, because the guy was there longer, moved up, blah, blah. I take over his accounts. They still will email him as if like they come to me with a bid, you know. Well, and if I don't give them what they want, they go to the male counterpart, and he's like, hey, by the way, I don't take care of your account anymore. Like, this is all on Miles over here. Yeah, dude. Just because, you know,
right.
Like, it's been really hard, you know, to try to teach people that just because I'm in a male-oriented business and just because I took over for a guy who used to do this, doesn't mean that I don't have the same balls. I'm still learning. Or, you know, I haven't really done, you know, sales in the aspect that I'm doing them now. It doesn't mean I'm not going to have my own stepping stones, but that's not because I'm a female. It's because it's a lack of quality job. You know, I haven't had that kind of job before. However, you throw me into a restaurant, I'll fucking own anybody's bitch ass, you know, no problem, hands down. You know, and again, you know, it's because of what I know. And it's because, again, growing up, that was, to me, was what girls did. You know, the girl's job. The girl's job was to go be a hostess, to go be a server, to go be this. And that's why even when you go into a kitchen, you work in a restaurant, all the females are servers. I can't tell you the amount of years I've heard about when I have male servers on the floor. When I had them, sorry. About how many people are like, well, I prefer a female server. So men can't serve your food? Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, it's a server. As long as he's good, it shouldn't matter whether it's a he or a she. Well, females should be serving. What? Fuck you, man. Fuck you.
You know what's funny is back before women really entered the workplace, men were waiters, and that was a job that they did. And they used to buy paper collars because they had to serve, and did fine dining. And men were waiters and maitre d's and the person that, the host or whatever. And it wasn't until later on when we entered the workplace that it kind of switched around. And now you have where men are the cooks and women are the servers. And it's like, so it's okay for men to cook professionally, but it's weird for them to cook at home and provide for their family. But it's okay for them to do it in order to make an income. And I've also come across that where men usually don't make as much as women when it comes to waiting tables because people think it's weird for a male waiter. And to me, I'm like, why is it weird? Who cares who serves you your fucking food?
As long as it's good food, it's good service. I don't understand it either. I don't understand
it.
that mentality. And at the same point, too, though, when you walk into a lot of restaurants, it's weird because there's a lot of these quality female servers, and yet sometimes they have a harder time becoming the female management. And restaurants have always been, I'm not going to lie, like, restaurants are very, like, if you're good at your job, they're going to promote you no matter what. And there's a lot of female service managers, and there's a lot of different female things that are going on out there. But at the same point, but you have those female service managers. Plenty of restaurants where, like, the entire, like, front management staff is nothing but males, and there's no females. And I'm like, where are you? Okay. And then you get other places where there's all female managers, and all the male managers are just in the kitchen because it's hot and it's sweaty and blah, blah. I'm like, there is a lot of sexism that happens in the restaurant industry that definitely needs a change.
But also, I get called, I'm a bartender. I tend the bar. And I get called a barmaid all the time, and it irritates me. Like, it's almost like other women will understand this. It's like when you get called ma'am.
Yeah.
It's like, I am not an old spinster. Please don't call me ma'am. And I understand it's just when you go from being a miss, like there's a whole part of your life where you're never called ma'am. And then one day people start calling you ma'am. And every time I hear someone call me ma'am, it's like nails on a chalkboard. Like, oh, have I reached the age where I'm now a ma'am? Because, you call a sir, you can call a young male a sir from the time he's 18, and that's fine. But, we have to reach a certain age before we're a ma'am.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am. Yep, exactly. And, when it comes from girls to females and that whole conundrum. Like, you're either a boy or you're a man, but I feel like you become a man at the age of, like, 12. But girls remain girls until we're, like, fucking 30. It's absolutely ridiculous to me. And then it's like, you're, like, a girl, you're a female for about 4 years, and then you're ma'am from 35 to death. It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. It really, really doesn't.
It's just like, no, it's fine.
Yep.
It's fine.
Yep, exactly, exactly.
I don't get it. To us women, and hopefully the women that are listening out there, I hope that you definitely kind of, and I can't imagine that most women don't know what we're talking about or haven't felt that kind of discrimination or barrier to their life, you know. And it's something that needs to be addressed, and we have to keep working towards. And there is a majority out there that wants to silence us and take us back to the dark ages. And we have to keep fighting. I just had a really great conversation with Mr. Crawford.
I like it.
Last night we were talking about abortion again, and that's something we talked about in our last podcast. And he was just talking. We both have conflicting opinions, and he's a man, and a lot of times men are like, "Oh no, it's fine, abortion. I'm cool with abortion," but he's not. And to him, his stance basically is a life lived is still a life lived, and my argument against that is, not everybody has a great, I'm not going to get into it, but anything. And we were just discussing it, and I said, you know what? When we were doing research for our podcast last week, I mentioned it in the podcast, that even I had forgotten the reason why we legalized abortion. It wasn't just about Roe versus Wade and the right to choose and things like that. It was about back alley abortions. I was like, we were talking about the legality of it and when it should, when their cutoff time and Plan B and things like that. And I said, this was something that I forgot, and I just wanted to let him know, like, before abortion was legal, I said women were still finding ways to abort children without the safety net of a medical professional. And, his argument back to me was, like, that just made it a free-for-all. And that's just like, that's the same argument that people use against giving, like, Planned Parenthood giving out condoms and birth control, is you're just letting people go out and fuck like crazy. Well, if they're on birth control, thare not going to get pregnant, or, there's like a 1% chance they're going to get pregnant. So I'm all about safe sex. I don't care if teenagers are going to be teenagers. They're going to do what they do, whether or not you restrict their right to birth control or condoms or things like that. And I realized that talking to a man, we have that conversation all the time, and we argue it back and forth because we have such conflicting views, and we're both trying to, like, get the other to see our side. And I see his side. I understand what he's saying. To him, life is precious, and it's still a life lived. But I had to point out to him that, like, over in Iceland, they offer a genetic test, and they have like 2 Down syndrome children in that country. And, like, I was like, that's our attitude here in America, Mr. Crawford. But if you take the whole world together as a picture, instead of just, when you live in one place, it's the same mindset with everybody else. We live in America, and this is how our country is. But there's 1,000 countries around the world, or hundreds of countries around the world, and everything is different. So it's not just us, Over in Iceland, abortion isn't an issue. It's not something that they debate, or it's a fact of life to them. That's just, to them, that's just, it's factual. It's not an argument. This is for the greater good, I guess, as they say. And, that's just one example of a country who views abortion differently, and it's not a contentious issue in their country. It's just an accepted medical whatever. And, with Ireland just now kind of saying, listen, we're tired of watching women die from self-aborting or having to go to other countries for it. That passed with flying colors. That was a very strong yes vote on that. And I think people just kind of need to keep that in mind as why we have these, why abortion is legal, is because just like we talk about drugs being legal and illegal, like, people still smoke pot even though marijuana is legal. And when prohibition was about, people still found a way to drink. Just because there's laws governing it doesn't mean that if it's illegal, people aren't going to still do it. So to me, the abortion argument, whether it's legalized or not, is a moot point, because people will still do it whether it's legal or not. But it's a way to keep women safe and to help them through that. And yes, maybe some women abuse that, but I don't know how I feel about that coming off the top of my head. And I don't really want to get back into abortion because it kind of detracts from the equal pay that we're talking about right now. But it kind of ties in with women's health, and who knows. I just really bothers me that we don't have equal pay. I can't imagine what fields we do have equal pay in. Are there any? Is there anything where women get paid more than men? I don't think so. I think that any kind of field that any women or man enter into, men will always make a little bit more than we do because they're men. And that's crazy, To me, it's mind-boggling how backwards we are. And it wasn't until Ronald Reagan became president and really pushed church into state politics. I was just reading about this the other day. Is we were very separate, church and state, and we didn't have a moral majority. And it wasn't until Reagan came about that the moral majority came about. Before it was just very logical. This is the law. This is the law. This is the law. And that's why our Constitution and our rights changed so quickly over the last 100 years. But in the last 30 or 40 years, it has slowed to a crawl because we have a moral majority who wants to push their morals on a country and make laws and make everybody abide by them when we're not just thinking logically about what's best for this country and taking the moral aspect out of it and just, being real. Just this is the reality of the earth that we live on, people. Women should be paid the equal amount as a man's work if she does just as good a job, or even better. It doesn't matter. Equality is the new trend in America, and that's across the board. And I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm just rambling on here.
All right. Well, I will let you. I'm going to wrap this up because I was just informed that there's a cat stuck in our tree.
Oh, no,
so,
not a kitty stuck in the tree.
I know that our kitty cat got out and now is stuck in this tree. And so I'm going to have to wrap this up.
No, I do too. I have to pee like a mother, everybody. I'm sorry.
I know, right? It's so bad.
That's probably why I get paid less, because I take more pee breaks. That's dumb.
All right. So to wrap it up, I'm going to do my shout-outs this week. My shout-outs all to the Alternative Facts Chicago. Love you too. Again, Alternative Facts Chicago. Look them up. Follow them on Twitter. Listen to their podcast. Great stuff. We appreciate you guys giving us a shout-out this week, so I'm repaying the favor. Also, the WAFL Waffle podcast. That dance video was fucking hilarious.
I loved it. I actually saw that too.
Oh my gosh, I was cracking up. And as always, the Know Your Draft podcast. It was a great session this week. They went on with the letter B movie draft. I thought it was very entertaining. And also, last and not least is Drinks with Larry. Love you, gentlemen. Always funny. You guys invited us to the hashtag WLIP or WLI Pod Peeps group, and that has been a great community to be a part of. And those are my shout outs, and also always the No Phony Network.
I love the No Phony Network. They're very supportive. We had a whole conversation about that and a possible tidbit that I might be doing coming up. My shout out this week, I've done this one before, but I love the community. They have a Facebook group. They're hilarious. The History Dweebs, the podcast, their little tagline is a lighter look at the darker side of history. They've done their last 4 or 5 episodes have just been phenomenal. I mean, they talk about murders or weird stories or just interesting historical. It's not always about murder, but a lot of times it is. But their podcast is hilarious. It's always the same 3 or 4 people that do it, and it's just one of my favorites. And they don't give me a shout out. They don't even know that I do that, but I'm always encouraging people to kind of check it out if you're bored and you want a good laugh, but you also kind of want a history lesson. And I always love NPR. They don't need a shout out
right?
at all, but
they always have good.
Yeah, but they have such a good selection, and they're kind of some of the originals in the podcasting field. They were one of the first podcasters out there, to kind of take that format. So that's pretty much my shout out, which I never have any, so I'm a little proud of myself for having at least one. Haha, look at me.
You
Boop, boop.
should be. Yeah. Look, I've got to pee like a mofo.
And you got a cat in a tree. So, all right, everybody, we'll see you next week. Have a great day, and thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.